Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Dentist Show. I'm Gary Tekes, your podcast co-host. We have what I think is going to be a very useful episode for you today. It's titled, The Most Effective Decision-Making Style Among Thriving Dentists. I think you'll enjoy this discussion of different decision-making styles and when to use which style. Before I get into that, though, a couple of announcements to make. First announcement is that coming up shortly after publishing this is our next Thriving Dentist Masterclass. It's coming up in about 2 weeks after this one publishes. That Masterclass is titled, Specific Plan to Reduce Your Practice Overhead to 60% or Less. That Masterclass is a 3-hour virtual course you attend from the convenience of your home or office. It's done live stream where I present it live. It's 3 hours. And the concept of a masterclass is where I can go into depth about a particular topic. And of course, this topic will be how to get your overhead to 60% or less. I could hardly think of a more timely topic than now, especially given the double-digit percentage inflation that we're all being confronted with these days. Some of you may even wonder, is it even possible to get my overhead to 60% or less? Well, here's the great news. Yes, I can share with you exactly how to do that. And you'll learn all about it in that masterclass. As I mentioned, it's done in a live stream format that gives you the chance to interact with me and ask questions and really make the information come alive. That's August 25th, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Very inexpensive, less than $100, and you'll get 3 hours of CE credits and lots of useful information you can apply the next day. You can register for that by going to thrivingdentist.com/masterclass. Hope to see you there. The next announcement is we have another tip to share with you today. This one comes from Dr. Jeremy Krell. And Jeremy's going to talk about some creative solutions to staffing challenges that many dental offices are experiencing today. And he's going to share some thoughts and some resources with you that you may find very, very useful. Well, with no further ado, here's Dr. Jeremy Krell with some creative solutions to staffing challenges.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeremy Krell, and I want to talk to you about staffing. Staffing is dentistry's biggest problem of today. Staffing is an issue that has resulted from economic downturns. It's an issue that has plagued us during the pandemic. It is a difficult area for dentistry because formerly our solution to almost every operational problem has been to hire an additional person and put that person on the problem, right? So I want to encourage you to think a little bit differently during this conversation. First of all, you're probably relying on local or regional resources to hire, right? You may be placing ads in local websites or on local newspapers or magazines. You might be using local temp agencies and others. Some of the startups that are out there are making a big difference in this space. You might want to look at Cloud Dentistry. You might want to look at OnDiem. You might want to look at Swiss Monkey. You might want to look at My Dental Gig. You might want to look at TempStars. These are excellent startups that in different ways and in different regions, they can really help you. There are also alternatives. There are a couple of companies out there providing virtual treatment coordination services. Some do it in specialty areas like ortho, some do it more generally like Patient Plus. So that's something that you may want to look at. Another thing that you may want to look at is automation in the office. Where can you take on a system that can automate processes that when you're down a staff member or have fewer staff members in general, you can run more leanly. Something like Simplify or patient engagement and solutions that handle your online queue, that handle your phones like PeerLogic and VoIP services. That allow you to automate the scheduling process. These are the solutions among the startups I mentioned that will really help you with staffing.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Thriving Dentist Coaching and Action segment. Today's topic is the most effective decision-making style among thriving dentists. This is Narain, your co-host. Before we get started, I want to take a minute to thank Jeremy for those creative tips or different ideas on dealing with staffing challenges. Thank you, Jeremy. Check out those resources that Jeremy suggested. Hopefully, you might find some of them interesting. Now, let's jump into today's topic. As all of you know, there are different ways to do anything. I mean, leadership style. We talk about 6 different leadership styles. We'll put a link to that podcast Gary and I did, where he talks about Dan Goleman's 6 leadership styles. Similarly, there are different ways to, come up with your, business plan, your mission statement, the type of practice you run. There is no one size fits all. Today, Gary is going to talk about 4 different ways to make decisions. And he's going to get into some details. He's going to outline these 4 styles and then talk about situations where one style might be the ideal, style for that particular situation. So you're going to learn 4 different styles, and you're going to learn how to apply these styles, in your daily life as a practice owner.
Naren, I'm excited about this topic because, as you know, and our listeners know, I've made it my life's work to study world-class dentists. And I kind of borrowed a concept from the author Stephen Covey. When Stephen wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that was a 20-year research project that resulted in that book. And what he was looking for were common denominators among effective people. What did they do? What did effective people do? And his 20-year study resulted in that book. Well, I've been looking for common denominators among world-class dentists. And one of the common denominators that I've noticed is that world-class dentists are decisive. Would you agree with that, Naren, from just your concept? They
Absolutely.
Make decisions.
I was reading a book recently by Henry Kissinger on leadership, and he talks about 6 different great leaders who led some amazing countries at amazing times in history. And every single one of them was decisive, 100%. They were totally decisive.
They do stuff, in
Yes.
a simple way, they do things. They're not resting on their laurels. They're not inactive. A world-class dentists are decisive, and they're doing things. Mm-hmm. And so one of the common denominators, I think, is that world-class dentists are decisive. They have that quality of being decisive. And as I started to observe this further, you mentioned it earlier, but Daniel Goleman, who is an author that we like a lot at Thriving Dentist, he's considered by many to be the founder of the science of emotional intelligence. He's alive today and active. And if you haven't read any of his books, I'd recommend that you read his books. And in particular, I'd recommend that you read a Harvard Business Review article that he wrote that was titled Leadership That Gets Results. Leadership That Gets Results. It's an HBR, Harvard Business Review article. And we actually did this as book club, a reading assignment with our clients, and had a lot of success with it. In that article, Daniel Goleman walks through the 6 different leadership styles. And his point is that an effective leader will know all 6 of these styles and know when to use each one. And compare that to someone that doesn't know this, then typically most people will have one default leadership style, and they'll use that as a one-size-fits-all because that's all they know. And so by natural behavior, they just do what they know. And he said the problem with that is that particular leadership style may or may not be the most effective in a given situation. And so, but if you keep doing a one-size-fits-all, you might end up with much less effective leadership results because often you've got the wrong tool for the job. So I'm going to kind of use the same concept here, and I'm going to share 4 decision-making styles. And I'm going to suggest that the listeners learn all 4 of these. It's kind of like having a tool belt. We're going to put 4 tools on your belt, and we're going to share with you when to use each tool. When is that tool the right tool for the situation? And just like Daniel Goleman shared in his Leadership Gets Results, I think this is going to make you a lot more effective because then you're literally going to be using the right tool for the situation. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the 4 different decision-making styles through a common phrase. This will all make sense in a minute. A common phrase. And I'm going to number them decision-making style number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. And they're not in order. It's just so we can kind of put some structure to this conversation. All right. So remember, common phrase that we all know. And listen to the nuances and the differences here. So decision-making style number 1 goes like this. Ready, aim, fire. Ready, aim, fire. Naren, I'm sure you've heard that phrase.
Yes.
Whether you've ever actually been to a gun range and shot a gun, that doesn't matter. We all know the term ready, aim, fire.
Yes.
Correct? Okay, that's
what we are taught to be the right way, or at least the default way of making decisions, right?
That's how we should do it, right?
Yes. At least that's what we are,
it's
taught.
the right order.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
Right. Well, again, sticking with that common phrase, I'm now going to distort it a little bit to describe the other 3. So decision-making style number 2 is just a juxtaposition. It goes like this. Ready, fire, aim. Ready, fire, aim. Sounds like the first one, doesn't it?
Yes, you're just flipping the fire and the aim, right? Instead of aiming and then firing, you are firing and then aiming.
Right. Ready, fire, aim. And you're thinking, wait a minute, that's not how we're supposed to do it. But many people function that way in their decision making.
True.
By the way, I will raise my hand right here and say my natural default style that I was born with, that's wired into my DNA, that I don't think about, it's just subconscious, is ready, fire, aim. That is mine. And until I knew the differences, that's what I used every time. Which again, may or may not be the right tool for the job. All right, let's go to the third one. Third one goes like this. Again, same concept. I'm going to distort it a little bit, but the third one goes like this. Ready, aim, 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 and then they lose the plot and forget to fire. Okay, I'm being humorous with this.
Yes.
But that is a style that some people use, right?
Yes.
And they get distracted in the aiming process, and then they forget the plot and forget what it was they were firing at in the first place. And that is a decision-making style that some use. And that it actually could be an effective style in the right situation. All right? Now, there's a fourth decision-making style, and it goes like this. Again, it's a distortion of what we've been sticking with. Ready, fire. Ready, fire. And there was no aiming involved in any order. It was just firing. So those are the 4 decision-making styles. And I could make a case for each one of those styles being effective in the right situation. Now, Nair, maybe you haven't thought about it at the nerdy depth that I've thought about it, but does that make sense to you as we think about some of your calling? I know you interact with a lot of other business people and you're in different study clubs. But think about those 4. Again, number 1, ready, aim, fire. Number 2, ready, fire, aim. Number 3, ready, aim, 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 and then never fire. And then number 4, ready, fire. I'll bet you could think of some of your colleagues and probably even name some, we won't do that here, but probably name some colleagues that follow that approach.
Absolutely, Gary. I was just reflecting on this because I know this is a topic we talked about yesterday too, in preparation for today's podcast. I think I started out as ready, fire when I was younger. Like I thought I'm decisive, I'm impulsive, so I make a decision. Even my wife, right? I didn't sit and look at pros and cons. We decided to get married and that's it. And 20 years later, we are here. It was not this, huge thought and thinking and all that stuff, right? So that's kind of how I was when I was younger. But I think then over time, I have used all 4 of those decision-making styles, like ready, aim, fire. So as I've grown as an entrepreneur, as a leader, and even a human being, I sometimes think about things for a while. I just let it stew, so to speak. And I guess that's what aim part, right? Think about it, and I don't like sit down and think about it. It's just in the back of my mind.
Well, maybe it could be maturity.
Yeah.
It could be emotional intelligence.
Right.
It could be perspective. You have perspective now in your mid 40s that you didn't have in your mid 20s.
Absolutely.
It could be a lot of things.
Exactly.
So what I'd like to do to make this really practical, I hope our listeners are sort of chuckling along at us here and maybe thinking about where your natural style is. What is your natural style when you're not thinking about it? What is it? And think about where you'd put yourself in. And by the way, I'm not saying any of those are bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the DISC personality styles. All the styles are good.
Right.
But there's strengths and weaknesses in each style. But what I'd like to do now is talk about a dental circumstance, maybe a decision or a strategy that you're considering in your practice that would be best suited for each style. So let's do that to maybe put some context into this. So for some practicality, let's again start with decision-making style number 1: ready, aim, fire. I would say a great decision that would be in the context of a dental office to use ready, aim, fire would be your decision to successfully drop PPO plans. That would be a great decision-making style to use, because what you're going to do, you're going to assess your readiness as a practice. You're going to make the decision that that's something I want to do. Is I want to regain control of my practice, quit turning over the determination of my fees to some third party that doesn't give one iota about the quality of care or my style of practice. I'm going to take that back over. So you've made that direction. And now you choose to do it very systematically. Ready, aim. The aim part would be walking through our 6 steps to successfully drop PPO plans. You're going to complete those. By the way, Naren, why don't we put in the show notes the Thriving Dentist Show episode we did called the 6 steps to successfully drop PPO plans. So the aim part of that would be to systematically walk through all 6 steps, because by doing so, you're going to be doing the work that will allow you to keep as many of your existing in-network offices, in-network patients as possible. And then when you've completed it, what are you going to do next? Fire. You're going to go. Mm-hmm. So that might be a really good example of ready, aim, fire. Does that make sense to you, Naren?
Absolutely.
Would you choose any of the other 3? So you're welcome to disagree with me. Would you pick any of the other 3 as being superior to that one for that decision?
No, and the reason I think I picked this is, for example, you have the PPO write-off calculator. So figure out how much you're giving up in write-offs. And of course, that's aiming. That's, doing some research, finding out the cost and the benefit of the decision. And then I think figure out how to successfully resign from PPO plan, which again is aiming. And I know you have the 6 steps, Gary. So, learn the 6 steps, see if those seem like something you can do.
Right. And that decision-making style matches nicely to that objective.
Yeah. So there's a lot of thinking to do. Yeah.
Naren, let's go to the second decision-making style, ready, fire, aim. And let me use an example where ready, fire, aim might be the most effective decision-making style. And here's the circumstance I'm going to use for an example there. Let's say you get an application from someone looking for a job, and it could be a hygienist, it could be an assistant, it could be an admin team member. Maybe they've heard you have a great practice and they're interested in working for a great practice. You're not advertising an opening, but someone shows up interested in working in your practice. If you've done an interview with that person, maybe even a working interview, and you feel like this person brings an amazing talent and spirit and experience to your practice, then I'm going to suggest that maybe ready, fire, aim is the best decision-making style. Because you don't know exactly how you're going to put that person to use in your practice. You don't know exactly. Maybe you don't know, now not so much for a hygienist, but maybe for an assistant or for an admin team member, you don't know exactly what their seat on the bus is going to be. But maybe you use the ready, fire, aim approach because you're always growing. One of the things that I like to embrace is the concept of at least double-digit percentage growth every year. So you're always growing. You're always looking for amazing team members. And maybe you don't know exactly the seat on the bus they're going to go, but you have faith that you'll figure it out. Ready, fire, aim. Naren, does that make sense in the possible application of that decision-making style?
Yes, absolutely, Gary. I mean, sometimes you get lucky and you come across a person in this case who is amazing and you don't have a perfect role, but your gut tells you, everything tells you, you need to hire that person. So
if we went to the first one, ready, aim, fire, we wouldn't hire them because we didn't have it all planned out.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so that could be a shortcoming in using that first method, the ready, aim, fire. So that's the second one. Now let's go to the third one. Ready, aim, 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 and we forget the plot and we never fire. Now, what could possibly be a good example when you might use that approach? Now, I'm going to use an example, and I'll just sort of explain this, and I want you to kind of think about this as we go through. Maybe the decision revolves around your real estate, your office, the real estate. And maybe you have a very nice office. The lease is actually functional. You've got enough space. It's a good location and it works really well. But ultimately, you would like, in your perfect world, you would like to own your own space. You're leasing the one, but maybe you'd like to own your own space. Does that make sense, Naren?
Yes.
Now, in many cases, I feel strongly, we did a whole real estate episode. I feel strongly about if you are in a market where you can own your real estate, ideally, I'd like you to own your own real estate, because then, you have an investment that serves your practice, but also serves your investment portfolio. But let's say you go down the path of finding something that you can buy, and nothing you find, you go down this path, and nothing you find would be an improvement over what you have. So you keep aiming. Let's try something else. Let's try something else. Let's look somewhere else. And maybe you end up looking at 20 or 30 listings, and you discover that nothing is superior to what you have. Then I think it'd be perfectly okay to never pull the trigger and take action on it, because what you found through your aiming process was nothing was an improvement over what you have. But you don't necessarily have to give up on the idea of owning real estate in your portfolio, because you could choose to buy either residential or commercial real estate outside of your office to meet your desire to have real estate in your portfolio. Does that make sense, Naren?
It makes sense, Gary. I think what you're saying is you have a certain criteria that you're looking for, and then if that criteria is not met, you don't pull the trigger. Now, one thought that just popped into my head is some people have the wrong mindset. Like, for example, when they're dropping insurance, they're afraid of losing patients. So that's the lens they're looking at it through, which is this fear, which is not real, but that's what they think it is. So they keep aiming, and they don't drop the PPO plans because of that fear. Right. So it's interesting. So sometimes it works for you, like in the example you gave, Gary. Right. Sometimes it doesn't.
It doesn't. You're right. You're absolutely right. And that's a good example of where I wouldn't recommend that style in dropping insurance. We see that in my coaching, where they just can't pull the trigger on the drop in the plan. Let me go to the fourth style and suggest a circumstance in dentistry where the fourth style, ready, fire. So the example there might be choosing a particular clinical area that you have interest in, but you haven't quite figured out how it would integrate into your practice. It's just something you're interested in. You'd like to add it to your skill set. You'd love to do the CE that would require you to master it. You haven't fully thought things out. You haven't thought how it applies in your practice. But you're going to dive in headlong because it's something you really enjoy. It's exciting to you. It'll help you in your mind better serve your patients, and you just don't have all the details figured out. That would be a good example of ready, fire, because the one thing I've noticed among world-class dentists, and another denominator, is that they participate in a massive amount of CE. So CE is going to serve you. and the more CE you take, the more it serves you. So that's one where I'm okay doing ready, fire, because maybe you've heard that a particular instructor is one that you want to study under, or there's a particular treatment area that you really want to learn a whole lot more about. And I'm perfectly okay with not a lot of structure in that and ready, fire. All right, as we bring this full circle here before we hit pause on the coaching in action, remember we've got those 4 leadership styles, decision-making styles. Number 1, ready, aim, fire. Number 2, ready, fire, aim. Number 3, ready, aim, 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 aim. Forget the plot and never fire. And number 4, ready, fire. As we wrap this coaching action segment, one thing I want to circle back around on is that every world-class dentist I've ever met is decisive. And so doctors, if that's something you feel like you could improve on, my suggestion is you can learn to become decisive. Now, some people are naturally more decisive just by nature, but you can learn to be more decisive. And the way you can learn to be more decisive is to practice, to exercise the muscle, exercise the decisive muscle. Naren, if you want to have stronger legs, you go to the gym and you do leg workouts to strengthen your legs, right?
Correct.
If you want to have more endurance, you want to do cardiovascular work to strengthen your cardiovascular fitness. So just like that, you can strengthen your decision-making skills by making decisions and practice with low risk decision-making when the stakes are low. Like if someone says, hey, where should we go to lunch? Make a suggestion. Say, hey guys, let's go here. And the more you do that, the more decision-making will become a habit. And you will find yourself improving in the act of making decisions. All right, I hope you found this interesting. We've got some great questions coming up. We'll hit pause on the coaching and action segment, and we'll resume with our Thriving Dentist Q&A.
Welcome back to the Thriving Dentist Q&A segment. I really enjoyed our coaching and action segment, Gary. The most effective decision-making style among thriving dentists. You went through 4 different styles and you talked to us about which style makes sense in which situation, and you gave us some examples. That was wonderful. I learned a lot and it makes sense. I have used all 4 styles myself, and I think some more than others, and I'm sure we all have tendencies, so that also made sense. Now, the Q&A segment is all about, okay, fine, I have different situations that I'm dealing with. Which style makes sense for me? And how do I apply it precisely? So I have some interesting questions. Now I think people are trying to apply this and really, make it part of their lives, Gary. So let me jump in. The very first question I have for you is, I'm considering dropping PPO plans. Which decision-making style would you encourage me to adapt?
Well, a great question. And Doctor, let me encourage you for making that a priority, because the more you learn about PPO plans, the more you realize how adversely it's affecting your practice. Now, hands down, I would say the most effective decision-making style would be the first one: ready, aim, fire. And what I mean by that is ready means that you realize how much it's impacting your practice and you have to do something about it. Aim means you're going to go through the 6 steps. Those 6 steps that we call the 6 steps to successfully drop PPO plans. Those are like a blueprint. Quite literally, I want you to think of it like a blueprint. We've done this a few hundred times, always successful with our clients on this. And so the blueprint becomes a proven way to get the results that we want. One of the results that we want is we want to keep as many existing in-network patients as possible. That's one of the results. That's one of the ways we measure success. And we know if you follow all of those 6 steps to completion, that's going to match up with that desire to keep as many of your existing in-network patients as possible. So you walk through the 6 steps. It's just like an architect drawing up a blueprint. Then all you have to do is follow the blueprint to successfully get that building. Same thing here. And then the fire part is when you've completed everything, now it's time to pull the trigger and go. Now, let me also comment that that's not the only decision-making style that could be effective here. That would be my preferred choice, Naren. But there actually is another one that could be used because it's been done before, and I'll tell the story. Believe it or not, it could be that number 4. Ready, fire. And the example is, this happened, and I can use his name, Dan Ullman, a client of mine from Boulder. This is over a year ago. Dan called me one day and he said, Gary, he said, I made a mistake today. I had a little break in my schedule and I took a look at some PPOs, some Delta Dental PPOs, or I looked at some Delta Dental EOBs, explanation of benefits. And the more I looked at those, the more I came to realize exactly how much I'm writing off from Delta. And the more I looked at, the more I felt like subconsciously my blood pressure was going up. And he said, I'm calling to tell you that I know, we're kind of midstream on dropping Delta on the 6 steps, but I'm calling to tell you that I'm going to resign tomorrow. And I'm not calling you to talk me down off the ledge. Gary, I made my decision. But I am calling you because I want your guidance on how to do this and get the best result, because I am resigning tomorrow. And I said, Dan, I heard you loud and clear, and I'm not going to try to talk you off the ledge. But can I ask you one question first? He said, absolutely. I said, Dan, are you willing to accept the possible consequence of losing a few more patients by resigning tomorrow than if you were patient and went through the entire process start to finish? He said, 100% willing to accept that, that possible consequence. I said, in that case, let's go. And by the way, he did resign the next day, and he had a fabulous result all the same. And when I did the debrief with him after the fact, after he'd gone out of network with Delta, and we let a recall cycle go through, and then we looked at it to see what percent of patients we lost, he lost fewer patients than he imagined. So his actual ready fire was effective for him. Now, it's not the one I'd recommend, but it actually worked. Does that make sense, Naren?
Yes. Yes.
So interesting. In another case, that decision-making style number 4 actually worked. But the one I would recommend would be ready, aim, fire.
Question number 2. My lease is coming to an end and I am interested in a larger office and new location. Walk me through some decision-making criteria for the best outcome.
Very good. We talked about a real estate question, kind of in the coaching in action. If your lease is coming to an end, I would assume you are leasing the space. You're not owning it. One of the criteria you need to look at is, does it make sense to own real estate in your community? In other words, could I own a building or a condo or my office space in a similar cost that what it would take to lease it? Could I own something? And in many cases, that's the case. You can actually own real estate for equal to or less than what you'd be paying for a lease. And then you don't have to worry about annual escalation clauses. Now, there's certainly many areas of the country where we can't do that, especially the large cities. I mean, if you're in downtown Chicago, you cannot own your real estate because the cost of that real estate is so much greater than what you could pay to lease that. So one thing you need to do is kind of get a broad understanding of all the different options that are available, what the different lease prices are. You also have to understand how far you could move and not adversely affect your current patient base. So you could do a zip code study inside your practice and look at where your existing patients come, and then use that as a guide to maybe draw boundaries up of how far you could move. We moved our initial office, when we did our initial fixer-upper office, we moved 3.2 miles, and that was a positive move. It was close enough to where it didn't affect any patient attrition. So you want to look at that. You also want to look at some very practical things like ingress and egress. There are some communities where the way the traffic patterns are set up, you literally can't get in and out of buildings. Naren, do you ever have that in Mississauga where you're going to a business or a restaurant or something, and you literally can't get in or out of it? Is that a design that's at play at all in Mississauga?
Oh, absolutely, Gary. Especially there's this street called Ontario. It's probably like one of the busiest streets in Mississauga, and it's a nightmare. You could spend 10 minutes just getting into a street, or depending on which part of Ontario, not the entire street, but some parts of it.
But parts of it, yeah. When we were looking at a number of years ago about possibly buying another building somewhere else, and there were a number of buildings that essentially got eliminated from consideration because you just couldn't get in and out of there. And if you can't get in and out, that's going to affect your patient base for sure. It's going to affect your practice. So to answer your question, which decision-making style, I'm going to suggest that ready, aim, 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 aim. And you might choose to forget the plot if you don't find something, but ultimately that aim, 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 aim might allow you to make a decision after you've done all the analysis. That's one that you really want to walk through careful analysis. So I'm going to suggest decision-making 3 on that one.
Now, I have a kind of a question that popped into my mind, Gary, follow up on this. What if, I know this happens when the real estate market is going up and you're looking to buy a house and you think, oh, you know what, let me wait till it comes down, and you just keep waiting. So like, what if your expectations are kind of like you're expecting to pay X per square foot, but the market is, X plus 5. Like, what do you do in those situations? Do you need to change your criteria, or do you say, you know what, forget it?
Well, in your mind, you need to think about what part of your criteria is negotiable and what isn't negotiable.
Okay.
Recently, in my client base, I didn't ask his permission, so I won't use his name. But in our client base, we had an opportunity where our client could expand his space by buying adjacent space. So usually adjacent space wasn't available in his, but now it's available. And the only downside to that was that the seller was a little bit proud on the price. He wanted a little bit more than fair market value. And for my client, that was kind of a deal breaker. I don't want to pay more than it's worth. I mean, that makes sense, right? No one wants to pay more than anything's worth, right, Naren?
Right.
But I helped him see a different perspective because I said, think about this for a minute. You do need to expand. And if you could expand and not affect your current operation while the new space was being built out, because in this case, the new space could be built out without any interruption to his current space because it's happening on the other side of the wall.
Right.
No downtime. And then his contractor said they could actually connect the space over one weekend. So Friday he could walk out with his current space and the crew would come in and connect the two spaces and then come in Monday morning with an expanded office. And I said, you know what? The benefit in no downtime is many times over the little bit of premium that the seller wants. And I'd kind of swallow your pride and give him what he wants. Because it's in the long run, this is a doctor who had another 20-year timeline in practice. That little bit of difference spread over the 20 years is actually going to be minuscule compared to passing on the opportunity, and then you're going to kick yourself because you didn't do it. So a little bit a different example, but you have to look at all the criteria for sure.
That makes total sense, and I think it's really useful. So there are some situations where you can change one of your criteria and then go through with the deal as opposed to just keep aiming. Makes sense.
I haven't worked with enough clients. I've had I've heard the stories of circumstances where doctors said, 10 years ago I had an opportunity to do this and I just couldn't pull the trigger and now I kick myself.
Right.
And so you don't want to have opportunity cost in there for sure.
Right. Let me ask the third question. In the past, I have been guilty of hanging on to underperforming team members for too long. Do you have any guidelines that'll help me here?
Yeah, not only guidelines, but I'm going to have a suggested decision-making style here. All right, so I have an axiom when it comes to hiring and firing. And my axiom goes like this: hire slowly, fire quickly. Hire slowly, meaning, hire for fit, hire for, be patient, don't hire out of desperation, but hire slowly. And that's more important than ever today, Naren, as we're recording this, because many offices are running shorthanded due to our current, labor situation. And they're running shorthanded. And I have seen clients make poor decisions about that when they hire a pulse. They just want to fill a position. And they're sort of dismissing whether it's a good fit or not. And that will usually be a bad decision. It'll be usually be a regretful decision. You want to hire for fit. So hire slowly, fire quickly. So that's where decision style number 4 can work. Ready, fire. And by fire, I mean fire. Not fire that team member. Ready, fire. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Once you've made that decision and once you realize it's not a fit, your gut intuition is going to be right on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely, Gary. Let me work on the fourth. Let me ask you the fourth and final question. I currently have a very strong associate dentist in my practice. I am undecided about continuing an in-associate relationship or making this particular person a partner. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and that's a very personal decision depending on many different circumstances. Our listeners will know that I do like the idea of having a 2-doctor practice as opposed to a solo dentist practice. Now, if your passion is to have the best solo dentist practice you could have, don't let me rain on your parade. But I don't think the solo dentist model is necessarily the best model, mainly because of 2 reasons. Number one, it's hard to invest in all the technology to keep your office state of the art if you're a solo dentist, because that technology is expensive and will be getting more expensive down the pike. And when you're a solo dentist, you've got to buy that yourself. So harder and harder to do that. And that's a good reason, but there's a second reason that's maybe more important, and that's that I don't meet many solo dentists that have a good work-life balance because they really feel like it's tilted in the favor of work, not so much life. And so I do like the idea of a multi-doctor practice, 2-doctor practice. But that could be an owner and associate or an owner partner. It could be partners where your partner and associate becomes a partner. We did that with Tim in our practice. And we did that because Tim was such a great fit at Life Smiles. His value system, his work ethic, his leadership was such a great fit that it was an idea where, we went from Paul and I owning the practice 50-50 to where we diluted our shares to a third, and Tim became an equity partner. And we chose to do that. And, I've had doctors ask me, well, Gary, why would you want to go from owning 50% of a practice to 33, a third percent of a practice? Why would you want to do that? And my short answer is that sometimes a smaller slice of a larger pie is worth more and better than a larger slice of a smaller pie. Does that make sense, Naren?
Yes.
So, in that case, I would evaluate it as, how does the associate fit? If the associate is desiring to be an equity partner and the fit is perfect, I would encourage you to bring your associate on as a partner. Because otherwise, what's the likely outcome if you don't do that? That associate will end up going somewhere else for greener pastures. And, someone that's a really good fit doesn't necessarily grow on trees. So if that's a really good fit, I would lean toward becoming, an equity partner and together figuring out how you could make the total, the partnership better for both of you. And believe it or not, it could be better to own 50% of a practice than 100% of the practice. Does that make sense? I know it's going to depend on situations, but does that make sense, Naren?
Yes, Gary. Yes.
So
that makes total sense.
What I would, the decision-making style that I would use there would be back to that decision-making style number 1, ready, aim, fire. Sit down, evaluate the circumstances, evaluate, in your mind, think about, well, if I don't make equity available, what's the likelihood of him or her leaving and going somewhere else? The last thing in the world you want with associates is a revolving glass door. That has a way of damaging your practice if you have a constant flow of new associates because you can't keep them. That has a way of damaging a practice in tangible and intangible ways. And so I would use that decision-making style number 1, ready, aim, fire. Sit down, work out all the details with the associate, get all the details mutually agreeable, and then pull the trigger.
Yeah,
well, those are 4 great questions. As we wrap up today, I hope this has been helpful. We've talked about the most effective decision-making style among thriving dentists. And again, I want to impart you as we wrap up today, work on developing exercise your decision muscles. Because by exercising your decision, you'll be more comfortable making decisions. And remember, I've yet to meet a world-class dentist that also wasn't good at making decisions and wasn't effective at making decisions. So you want to be decisive. Well, as we wrap up today, I want to take a minute and say thank you, Naren. Thanks to you for hosting the Thriving Dentist Show podcast. Also, thanks for your amazing team at Equa in the support that you provide us by helping us get our new patients. We've been clients now for 6 years, and I'm absolutely thrilled with our marketing. We see more new patients than we ever have at a lesser cost than we ever have, and I sure like both of those dynamics. And by the way, in tune with this theme of this podcast episode, I'll say one of the best decisions I ever made was to become a client of Equa Marketing. So Naren, thanks to your team for all that you do to support our practice. I also want to thank all of our listeners. We appreciate you. We love what we do here at the Thriving Dentist Show, and I want to take a minute and say thanks. If you haven't done so already, jump on iTunes and write us a review. And hey, tell a colleague about our show. We'd love to help more dentists develop a thriving practice. On that note, thank you for the privilege of your time, and Naren and I look forward to connecting with you on the next Thriving Dentist Show.